Well, hello. Welcome to Orchid Bloom's podcast. Welcome back, bloomers, to Orchid Bloom's podcast. I am your host, Orchid Brown, with Orchid Bloom's podcast. You can find me on TikTok, X, and Blue Skies at Orchid I Brown. Obsession Blog has posted a new blog post called Stay Humble, Sit Down, available at tao.ca/blog. So I hope you read it. It is an extension to our previous podcast episode, which is Character Assassination. While I was writing that podcast episode, the song that has been playing in my head since last summer, maybe spring, was the song is called Be Humble, Sit Down. But in my head, it was Stay Humble, Sit Down. So I decided to write this blog post as an extension to the Character Assassination podcast episode. So enjoy, take a read, go to the social media TAO Network Instagram page, find the post and engage with that post and let me know what you think. Today's episode is a continuation from Character Assassination. If you have listened to the previous podcast episode, you may remember I said something that I didn't fully unpack at the time. I said that character assassination is often an attempt to assign you an identity by people who never chose their own. I want to build on that today with this podcast episode because there is something underneath character assassination that doesn't get talked about enough. And I've experienced it personally, not as a theory, not as an observation, but someone who lived through it in real time. Today we're talking about gender envy without identity. Let me start by defining what I mean because clarity matters here. Gender envy without identity is when somebody wants the power, favor, or outcome associated with another gender or another person, but does not want to do the internal work of becoming who they are. This isn't about gender exploration. It is not about self-discovery. It is not about identity, fluidity, or transition. This is about appropriation. This is about trying to wear someone else's identity as a shortcut to their destiny. And there's a very important distinction that I want you to hold on to throughout this episode. Identity is formed, envy is borrowed. So what do we need to know about identity? Identity is slow. It's built in private moments, in solitude, in failure, in discomfort, in saying no when yes would be easier. Identity comes from alignment, when who you are internally matches how you move externally. So if you have been through any of the things that I've just mentioned, know that you know exactly who you are because you've been in the trenches, you've done the work, and you have pushed forward, and here you are today, a survivor. Envy, on the other hand, is impatient. Envy does not want to form, it wants to transfer. It looks at someone else's life, confidence, favor, or influence and say, how do I get that without being me, without becoming me? This is why I said you need to love yourself. And I love myself so much, which is why my identity is so rooted in me. I don't have to come and tell you what my identity is. You see it when I walk into a room. You feel it in my presence and my aura. It is who I am. Now, how do I get that without becoming me? Says I don't love myself. When envy doesn't have identity to anchor it, it becomes something else. It becomes fixation. It becomes imitation. It becomes control. This is where gender enters the conversation, not as identity, but as a symbol. The last time I saw this level of fixation And imitation that I had mentioned a little bit of in the Character Assassination podcast episode was with a boy who did not seem to have an identity. And how I figured that out is that the people that this boy was leeching off of in this toxic environment, leeching off of their identity, their knowingness of self, once they distanced themselves from this boy and just disappeared and made it increasingly difficult for him to access them, he seemed lost, completely lost. Like he did not know what to do, where he was going. It came to a point where every day or every time I saw this person, his language or way of communicating sounds similar to somebody else in the office. And it was like different on each week. And I thought, what a sad, sad situation to be in the situation where someone assigned you an identity that wasn't yours. You abandoned your own identity. And now you're in this toxic environment, desperately trying to leech off anyone who seemed like they have a sense of self. And so I ran. Listen, boundaries were up, distance was created, and I made sure, I was like, no, man, you're scaring me. You are really scaring me. But anywho, one thing I wish I had mentioned in previous podcast episode was that a toxic environment was never designed to be safe. And this is something that a lot of people don't understand, is that when you go into a workplace, you go into a relationship, you go into an institution, it doesn't matter where you go. It could be people, it could be a place, it could even be a thing. And you find that all of these lists that I just mentioned, they're very toxic. Toxic people, toxic environment, toxic institution. It was designed that way. It was designed that way to keep people constantly distracted, constantly working, constantly stressed, constantly just not knowing where they go. It's easy to manipulate and control people if they're destabilized. It was never designed to be safe. And as for smear campaigns, which is designed to create more chaos, to blow up the facility, if you really think about it, when people use smear campaign, it's a compliment to me because they're saying, I'm exceptional without saying it out loud, right? You don't attack someone that you think is weaker than you, that you think is beneath you. You don't do that to people you claim to not like. You do that to people that you admire, that you want what they have, envy. You see their hard work and it pisses you off because you can't produce at that level, jealousy. They're exceptional. They're exceptional people, and you need to tear them down to make yourself feel better about yourself. But it's still a compliment to you. Now let's get back to what I mentioned but didn't fully explain why people assign identities to other people. Many people never choose their identities. It was assigned to them by systems, families, institution, or power structures. If you think about it, I was even assigned an identity as a child by my own mother. Then you go to family members' houses and they start assigning a specific identity to you in their household. And everywhere you go, you have an identity. Even to strangers on the street, they see you one way because they saw you do something. So they don't think that maybe that's not your identity. That's just how they see you. And this starts as a child. Sometimes, some parents like to predict, their grandparents like to predict as well, these babies as upon birth, that this is where they're going to be, this is what their outcomes are going to be. And yes, that could be foresight. Maybe this grandmother or parent has a spiritual gift to do that, but it's still an identity that is being associated to this person, to this child. And then that child is going to grow up in that, leaving no room for this child to express who they are in multifaceted ways. Because we are all multifaceted. We're human. We can switch up at any time. We can still end up in the destination that you had predicted as a child because you have foresight, a gift of foresight or a prophecy. But at the end of the day, they're still going to go down certain roads, and it's going to show character, and it's going to build their character before they get to that end goal. And sometimes you may not like what they're doing, but it's how they learn. This is how you learn lessons. When we talk about systems, families, institution, and power structures assigning identity to other people, they were taught to do this. They were taught who to be, how to behave, what success looks like, what obedience earns. And they accepted that assignment, believing there would be a reward, status, security, recognition, and favor. But when the rewards doesn't come, when they do everything right and still feel empty, something fractures. Disappointments turn into resentment. Resentment turns into comparison. Comparison turns into admiration. Admiration turns into competition. And eventually, competition turns into appropriation. This is where the swap, the destiny swap, comes in. If I can wear what you wear, speak how you speak, move how you move, maybe I can live what you're living. This is not inspiration. This is not learning. This is identity theft at the psychological level. But of course, wearing what you're wearing as a way to imitate you falls under same sex. So if you're a woman will try to dress the same way you do to try to get the same favors and blessings that you do. But I mean, women can wear men's clothing in relationships and friendships. We borrow each other's clothes. So it is relevant to certain situations. But most likely I won't be using the wearing of the same clothes going forward because, again, we're talking about gender envy without identity. Now, what does that look like, gender envy without identity? Let's make this practical because many people feel this before they can name it. I did. Thank God for discernment. I didn't know what it was called, but when the opposite sex starts mimicking me and starts trying to behave like me and starts trying to use my jokes, it becomes an alarm. There's an alarm. It just rings all around you and you're like, uh-oh, something's up. I just didn't know what it was called. It's called gender envy. Gender envy without identity often looks like someone excessively mimicking your language, tone, and mannerisms. Suddenly adopting your phrases, your cadence, your ideas, suddenly alignment with your interests after observing your success, competing with you while claiming admiration, trying to replace you instead of collaborating with you, feeling visibly uncomfortable when you succeed, but oddly relieved when you struggle. And I want to say this plainly. This is not flattery. This is fixation. Fixation happens when admiration turns into attachment, and attachment turns into regulation. In other words, they're not inspired by you. They're using you to stabilize themselves. That's why it feels creepy, because it is. It's boundaryless. It's performative, and it's rooted in insecurities, not respect. As I mentioned before, I have experienced this. I didn't understand this pattern until I lived it. The Psychological Manipulation podcast episode was my experience in real time living through that. I wasn't even able to define completely what I was experiencing at the time. Intuition and discernment really came through. It helped me to process everything in real time. And even then, I was still trying to piece the puzzles together. And honestly, I love puzzles, but this was a very difficult puzzle to put together. But thankfully, I did, just in time. What started as admiration turned into imitation. What turned into imitation turned into monitoring. What turned into monitoring turned into fixation. Scary, right? because it really was scary. It came to a point where I would leave to walk to my car and I'd be looking over my shoulder because I was like, this creep's going to come out of somewhere, out of nowhere, and just grab me. Like, that's literally how it felt. It was very psychotic, very psychotic. As I said before, they copy you. They use your language, your phrases, your tone. There was proximity seeking. You know, they just pop up out of nowhere, constantly trying to talk to you. Very clingy, very, very clingy. And you don't understand where it's coming from. They even start making up stuff just to be in your presence when you didn't ask any questions or notified them of any problem. Somehow they find a problem to come to you for. It was very much proximity seeking. There was watching like a creep, constantly watching. There were people sent to watch me. I'm telling you, it was heavy, very heavy. I have never experienced someone so obsessive teach other people to be just as obsessive as themselves, and then they all just come together as this obsessive bunch to create a whole smear campaign to try to destroy someone's character while still trying to have proximity. Very odd. If you don't like the person, if you're going to talk shit about the person, why are you clinging to them? Why are you a leech? So when I set boundaries, real boundaries, things escalated. I wanted to say something important here. When you set boundaries with people who has a fragmented identity, you're not just removing access, you're removing regulations. For someone without a stable internal self, separation doesn't feel like rejection. It feels like alienation. Please understand, how they feel is not your problem. You are not their mama. But they feel that you are responsible for their alienation, as if they are not responsible for themselves. So the response isn't sadness, which someone with a good identity would feel. It's panic. That's when desperation shows up. That's when smear campaigns begin. That's when retaliation replaces admiration. Not because you did something wrong, but because without proximity to you, they lose access to the version of themselves they were trying to become. This is why character assassination often follows fixation, because if they can't be you, they will try to interrupt you becoming you. The truth always speaks for itself. Gender envy without identity often reveals a fragile sense of self, unresolved inadequacies, fear of introspection, and lastly, dependence on external validation. These are people who don't want to be inspired. They want to be in control. Inspiration requires patience. Envy wants immediacy. Inspiration studies the discipline. Envy copies the costume. And copying never produces favor. Why is this dangerous? Copying is not neutral. Psychological identity theft destabilizes both people involved. The person copying never finds coherence, and the person being copied is often forced into containment, shrinking, adjusting, protecting. If you change your behavior to feel safe, that doesn't mean you lost yourself. It means you were protecting yourself. But this is why awareness matters, because the danger isn't that they'll become you. The danger is that they'll try to put you out of alignment, so you would forget who you are. Now, these are some tactics that I used, that I just mentioned, when I was dealing with a person such as this. In that toxic environment and dealing with a person such as this, and keep in mind, what I didn't realize at the time was that there was actually more than one version of this person in the office, the toxic environment. Now, when I started noticing the mimicking, the trying to copy, the language change, the tone change, phrases that I use being reused, I decided that, okay, well, I heard the alarm, got it. Now I'm going to switch it up. So I started using urban terms because they don't use urban terms. And whenever, I'm speaking to a person that is the same color as myself, I would articulate myself really well because they don't know how to do that. So I'd have to like switch it up based on whichever of these copycats I'm dealing with in a day. And so I started dressing differently because I knew that, this female and the male don't have this in their wardrobe. I started changing my hair as often as I possibly can. I started changing my looks as often as I can. I even started wearing makeup to change that often as I can because I know for a fact, like the female that's trying to copycat me in the office doesn't really wear makeup. So she's going to have to go spend the money to be me. And as for the guy, I just, like I said, kept my distance. Whenever I spoke to him, I used urban terms because he's not Black. And so it kind of put both these two copycats in a situation where they couldn't keep up. Now they were stuttering. Now their words were mismatched. They could not produce a clear sentence at some point because now I've disrupted their mimicking of me. And then, of course, there's another copycat who isn't in the office, but kind of wants to match my energy by showing like, look, I can do as much work as you do. And I said, great. So I stepped it up a notch to get them to waste their energy, to get them to feel depleted, because now you're trying to show that you're one with me. See, we're the same, but at the same time copying me while smearing me behind my back. So I was like, okay, let's play this game. Since this is a game you want to play, let's play. And I outdid all of them because you can't be me. I am the blueprint. You cannot copy a blueprint that was never given to you. I would need to give you that blueprint. I didn't give it to you. So even if you had been successful at mimicking my energy, mimicking my tone, mimicking my phrase, mimicking, how I dress, any of that, anything associated with me trying to mimic my activities or what I'm interested in, all of that, you can mimic all you want. It will never last because I am the blueprint. I built me. You cannot claim to have built me. You can't even copy completely my core. My core is the blueprint. But please understand, I'm not saying that I've never been inspired by people. I have been inspired by many people over the years, but I've never tried to be them. I learned from them and I adapt certain things that they were teaching me in that moment, but I wasn't trying to be just like them. Yes, I would try to change the way I dress for the environment that I'm in, because everyone does that, but it's not mimicking somebody in that office. It's just, that's what I had in my closet, and this is how they dress in this environment, so I'm going to have to start wearing those clothes in this environment. Just like if you go into an environment where everyone looks like a bum, some people are, not wearing bras in the office, and some of them are wearing pajamas in the office. You know what I mean? It's just really dingy place to work. Smells funny too. Then you dress down. You don't bring out your best. And my closet has a variety of clothes, from a gown to, sweats. So doesn't matter where I go, I will be able to adapt. And whatever impression I'm trying to make, if I'm trying to impress the right people, I promise you I can step it up. I am ready. This aura is ready. Those people that inspired me did change me for the better. Even though these people are no longer in my life, they were meant for a season. I'm sure you know where I'm going with this. But they inspired me. They made me see the world differently. They opened my eyes to not just a narrow path, but opened it to be much wider. There were certain things that I have done in my life and experienced in my life because they gave me the courage to try it. And when I tried it, it was almost as though I became more cultured because of this, So that's what I mean by inspired. It's not copying the person. You can be inspired by them, but you don't have to copy them. they can teach you something. Your job is to learn and grow as a person. And that's exactly what I did. I learned from my experience. I learned from what they were teaching me, and I grew as a person. And I'm still growing, and I'm so happy for that. So when I see people who mimic and try to follow behind people trying to become them, literally become them, like put their flesh on their flesh and walk into them, it's weird. It's just weird. Like, that's just scary to me. It feels like Halloween every day, every time I go to the office. That's scary. So I once used the term penis envy for a podcast episode to describe a woman embodying masculine traits in a male-centered environment. And that was toxic too. I believe I explained in the podcast episode what penis envy truly meant, and that it was more of an inspiration for the podcast episode, but I had to name it penis envy because a lot of people seem to associate penis envy with women who embody masculine traits in a male-centered environment. But I made sure to, provide the definition and explain that this is not the case, but I can understand why a lot of male would say that about a woman who isn't behaving like a regular woman. It was a crazy term to use to describe a woman wanting to be a man, but I went with it since it was used by multiple people. And I think back in the day, it seemed to be a really popular term to use throughout that year. It's like a trend. Within that podcast episode, which I recommend you go and listen to it, the focus wasn't on envy. It was adaptation. And this is something that I'm understanding now through this podcast episode. Adaptation is survival. Gender envy without identity is control. That distinction matters. Now, forgive the penis envy title for that episode. I believe I explained that women do not envy what's between a man's legs. We don't. I'm sorry. I don't want your penis. I don't want it hanging there. I don't want it, your balls, my balls, because apparently, we want penis. I don't want my balls to be sticking to the side of my leg on a hot day. I don't. So no woman want that, which is what I explained in the podcast episode. We don't want what's between your legs. You can keep your dick. We keep it. It's the freedom and the power. So penis envy should never be used. The hope with that podcast episode was helping people to understand that you can't use penis envy to describe such women in a male-centered environment. And I was hoping that episode would scare some people off from using that on women. So I haven't heard it since. So I guess the trend is gone. But when you are inspired by someone, you study the discipline, not the costume. And I think what people from that podcast episode was interpreting is that the environment that we were working in, men and women were wearing the exact same uniform. And because they were wearing the exact same uniform, women tend to, especially women in position of power, were behaving like the men. And some of the men, weren't being that excessive because they are rooted in their identity. They are man. But the woman kept forgetting that there's a W-O before the man and started behaving like a man, talking as aggressive as them, pushing out their chest, shoulders back, in your face, ready to fight, women and men. And I just was sitting there watching all of this, and I thought this would be a great podcast episode. And that's how the penis envy episode was born. These women wanted to be respected. These women wanted the power and praise and favor that the other men who are on their level was receiving. So they put on a costume. They completely threw away their own identity to embody the identity, the mannerism, the language, the phrase, the tone of a man. They were already wearing the clothes, so they may as well just become that man that seems to be receiving a lot of favor, and they believe that it's because he's a man. That may not be the case. But those women in that environment didn't look at it that way. They just thought they needed to be a man to be accepted into the boys' club. I can't call it a man club. Nobody calls it man club. The boys' club. And that's not it. It's not because they're smarter than the women. The women were clearly smarter than them. It wasn't because, they had a penis between their legs. That wasn't it at all. They were just charismatic. People liked interacting with them. There's so many factors that come into why they're receiving so many favors. And as they were mimicking this, and they've been doing it for years, copying these men, it never worked for them. They never got promoted. They were basically listed as aggressive and difficult. Mind you, they're white women. These are usually words you hear for black women. These were white women who chopped their hair off to look like a boy and was dressed like a boy with tits and clearly a vagina. But the fact is, they genuinely thought that if they just embodied the man, that they would get the same favors. They would be in the boys' club. And it doesn't work that way. I felt watching this that if they had stuck to their identity and really put in the work to show their competence, that maybe the tide would have shifted and the respect would have eventually been given to them. But because they were so desperate for that validation in that moment so quickly, again, envy is immediate. They want it now. They want to be respected and treated a certain way now, without any proof of your competence, without any proof at all. That people should just automatically think that you are the best at your job. You are just like us, when really they don't know you. They don't know you, and you didn't take the time to allow them to know you. But instead, you decided to completely throw away your own identity and adapt to an identity that was never yours. So you were never successful. And you became resentful and bitter. You could see it on their face. You can see it in their mannerism. You can see the anger just overflowing from them. People did not want to be in their presence. They had to force people to be in their presence by causing chaos. That's how bad it was. And I was just, like I said, watching this going, oh, this is not working for you because this is not your identity. You did not embrace your authentic self. You would be surprised by people when you show them your authentic self. You can create a fan base just off being your authentic self. And the people that don't like you, they're weeded out. They're weeded out, to stay away from them. And you don't run around chasing validation from them to try to blow up their heads and build up their egos. You have to be rooted in your identity and stand on your character. And this is something these females didn't do. And guess what? They're going to retire and realize that all of that was for nothing. The one thing I learned about these women were that, they lost their husbands. Their kids don't come around to see them anymore because they brought that copying that they did, embodying these men into their personal life, and it affected their marriages. It affected their relationship with their kids. And all they had was each other. Mind you, they didn't even like each other. You can see the looks that they give each other, dirty looks, because they were competing with each other to be in this boys' club. And I'm like, none of the boys are competing, so why are you? At this point, create your own clique, do what you got to do, and rise. Rise on your own merit. Don't try to be someone else. So again, the Penis Envy podcast episode was kind of like a part 1 to this episode, and that is why I kept bringing it up towards the end, is because you really do need to go and listen to that one. Before or after this one, it doesn't really matter, because it's the same outcome. When you're trying to mimic someone else, copy them, embody them, trying to rip off their skin and put it on yours so you can become them, it never works out. Those women from the Penis Envy podcast episode amounted to nothing. They retired, they got a pen, and that was it. They lost everything, though, personally, just for a pen. And to get into a boys' club, they were still never invited into. There is no real reward for taking on an identity that was never yours. There is no reward. I have never seen it in all the years that I've lived on this earth. And I've lived in Jamaica where I've seen it there. And I came to Canada and I see it here. And I'm telling you, not one of these people are any more successful. They have not been rewarded. They have not been rewarded. For the women, they got the men that they were looking for on embodying another woman. But then that man knocked them up. They had kids by this man and the man left them. These men who are doing it to other men and women, they end up with nothing. At the end of the day, yes, we can say, oh, you got kids out of this guy, so it's good. But really, you still ended up with nothing because now you got kids to feed. He ain't paying you any money. So what the fuck did you get out of it? What did you get out of it? No one ever gets rewarded in these types of situations. And that is the reason why I was like, I'm not growing up to be that person who just changes myself to be just like somebody else, all because they're blessed and highly favored. I just won't be that person. If I want to be blessed and highly favored, I need to work on me. I need to grow me. I need to learn. That's all I needed to do. And that's exactly what I did. So when people are mimicking me, it should be a compliment. But unfortunately, it creeps me out. It creeps me out. It makes me feel like my life is in danger and I need to run away from you. Run, not walk, run. Inspired people develop their own voice, refine their own gifts, honor differences. And this is a part that a lot of people forget. You need to honor the differences between you and this person that you're inspired by. Like, honor the differences, recognize how great they are for being who they are, and recognize that you will be great as well once you do some work on yourself and you can honor your differences too. We are all unique. Envious imitators, they just copy aesthetics. They chase proximity, expect transfer of favor. The term that comes to my mind when I think about envious impersonators is that the need for proximity is their way of trying to put on the costume of successful by being in proximity to someone else. It's like borrowing their successes to try to make themselves feel better about themselves, to look a certain way, to get that favor, to get that blessing. And so they're hoping if they continue to do this over time that it will transfer to them. And it's like, it doesn't work like that. You can't transfer someone's identity onto yourself. What? The logic. Make it make sense. Yes, you can piggyback on somebody else's hard work and claim it for your own behind their back. That's called theft. You can do that and get what you want out of it. But eventually, you will get caught, because when they learn you can't actually do what you said you could do, and you didn't bother to learn, or the person didn't teach you how to do it when you robbed them, you're now stuck in a situation where you're either running back to beg the person you stole from, that you lied on, that you did all of those bad things to steal their blessing and favor, and ask them to teach you how to do it. And if they're smart, they won't. They'll let you sink with the ship you created. Because clearly this is a lesson that you need to learn, because what you did was wrong. So there is no reward for being envious. There is none. Copying will not give you their power. Their power comes from alignment. Alignment. Say it with me. Alignment. We have to continue to walk in our true identity. True identity takes time. It requires solitude, honesty, and discomfort. So many people lie and lie and lie to themselves, and then turn around and lie and lie and lie to everyone else, that when it's time to actually tell the truth to themselves, it hurts. It hurts. It's the most uncomfortable thing that these people have ever experienced, because that mask that they wear every day is a constant lie that they have to keep up. A constant lie. They have to replace a lie with another lie with another lie. And they just do this all of their lives. And then they wonder why people don't like them. They wonder why people see that pattern and want nothing to do with them. So yeah, solitude, honesty, discomfort, is like kryptonite to liars who built themselves on a complete lie. But once you embody who you are, things shift. Favor follows alignment. Confidence becomes quiet. Presence becomes undeniable. Aura, baby. Aura. Now I'll end with this. What attracts people to you is not what you do, it's who you're becoming. And that cannot be stolen. You can't steal it. So all of you people out there mimicking, changing your mannerism, trying to literally stalk people into becoming them, it's not going to work. It won't. And if you can pull it off for a month, you won't be able to keep up the lie for long. People can't keep up with their lies. That's how they get caught. That's how you get caught. You can't keep up with the lies. So stop. Eventually, that new mask that you copied from somebody else is going to fall off and people are going to see exactly who you are. Let me tell you, they're going to find out. There's no reward for what you're doing. None whatsoever. But I wish you the best of luck. Thank you for joining me today on the Orchid Blooms podcast. Your support is appreciated. Take this time to subscribe, follow, rate, leave a review on the podcast platform of your choice. Our social media pages are Orchid Bloom's YouTube channel, The Ambitious Obsession Network on Facebook, at The Ambitious Obs on Twitter, at The Ambitious Net on Instagram. I mostly post on Instagram, so go there. If this episode resonated with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Until next time, keep blooming, and I hope you have a splendid week.